My name is Jessica Alstrom, and I am the CEO of Transcendence Wellness Center. I have a master's degree in biochemistry, and honestly, studying the effects of reversing trauma in the biochemistry has been my passion my whole life. I'm not a veteran, but I was a child of abuse, and so I suffered from PTSD very, very early in life. About 2 years old is when my abuse started, so I know all about the art of war. And as I got older, I realized that I was creating patterns in my life based on the things that had happened to me. Post-traumatic stress disorder, right? So you start to live your life through your trauma. And as you live your life through your trauma, you realize is that you are living in a completely different world than anyone else. You may see the same things, you may hear the same things, but the way that you're processing data is completely different. And anyone who has been to war or has been abused knows exactly what I'm talking about. And so when I was 30 years old, I had a breakdown, and I said there has to be a different way. There has to be a different way than just playing out patterns based in trauma. And instead of jumping on the bandwagon of Western medicine and getting on enough drugs to numb my life, I decided to look for answers. And that's when I started studying the brain-body connection, holistic nutrition, genetics, epigenetics, psychology, anything that I could get my hands on that showed me an understanding of how something so traumatic could affect not only one's focus, but their entire outlook in their life. And that is when I started my pursuit and eventually met Susie. And we opened Transcendence Wellness Centers, which was basically a center for reversing trauma. We were going to be kind of the gorillas and try everything that the doctors weren't trying. We were going to use holistic, we were going to use Eastern medicine, we were going to use science, and we were going to dabble in spirituality as well, because again, science is one door of a house, and that's when you have to open it up to something bigger called consciousness and awareness. And as we began that journey, I was going through an intense healing process of my own. Because I am a big advocate of not being a philosopher, but a student teacher, which means that I'm always a student while I'm a teacher. And I was actually going through this process on my own to heal my childhood. Going through all different types of therapy and science-based therapy, technology-based therapy, to basically rewire the patterns of my brain so that I could look at my children and look at my life and see hope and safety instead of protection and that victimization that happens when we develop that PTSD. So over the last 7 years, that's what I've been giving my focus on is trauma. Chemical trauma, physical trauma, and emotional trauma. Because all three of those things affect the biochemistry, that affect your perspective, that affect your reality, that affect how you're able to process your entire world. So that's been our search, and the reason why we have chosen to work exclusively with veterans on this project is because I think that there's a lot of amazing therapy for abused children. I think there is a ton of resources for abuse out there, but our veterans are kind of left behind. I've extensively researched the VA, and I haven't found yet anything that actually is not a Band-Aid. That is something that gets to the root of the issue and actually heals the trauma itself. And so with the technology that I used myself, that I use in my centers, in my Consciousness Academy that is in about 12 different countries right now, all over the world, we are inviting veterans to come in and go through these studies with us and actually go through a process of not only just band-aiding the effects of the trauma, but going through a deep rehabilitation process using this particular device that we're going to talk about tonight in the study. So, let's talk a little bit about the brain-body connection and PTSD itself. I said earlier that once trauma happens, you are forever changed. Now, what is trauma? Trauma is a freeze or a fight or flight moment in your life. That's what it is. It is any time the body has to move into safety and out of heal and reboot and go into accelerated nervous system freeze. Okay? And so basically any time you're faced with a survival issue. Depending on how you're dealing with it, you can create PTSD with that. So a child being abused, or someone kicking in a door and having a bomb explode on them, or being, highly medicated and it have some sort of neurotoxic effect. There are thousands and thousands of ways to create PTSD in the brain and the body, because all it is post-traumatic stress, which means once the trauma happens, it is actually creating a neural pathway. And a neural pathway is like a highway of your brain. And the way that I explain this is many times you have practiced doing something and it has become automatic, yes? You practiced tying your shoes and it became automatic. Once something becomes automatic, it is called a neural pathway, which means you no longer need conscious awareness to activate that thought, the memory, and the reaction behind that. So when you have a trauma, you don't need to practice something, it's instant. It becomes a neural pathway instantly, because basically it's a survival moment that the body doesn't want to experience again, and so it goes into high alert and it basically puts it into the library of neural pathway. So in that moment, your brain is forever changed. Just like tying a shoe, that trauma has become automatic and is filed not in the conscious awareness, but in the subconscious awareness of who you are. And now, when something is triggered, you move into autopilot and you replay those moments. Which means that it takes a lot of willpower, which actually you really can't in the moment of a trigger. Anybody in the moment of a trigger actually been able to stop and say, this is just a neural pathway playing itself out? No, you fully embody that moment as if it's real. Because what happens is in a neural pathway is basically a cluster of belief systems that's called a mindset. And once you have a mindset that you're in danger, or that your survival is not safe, you will forever hold that story in the brain until we change it. Now, lucky for us, the brain is plastic. And if we created it, we can uncreate it. If it was wired in, we can rewire it. And we can use technology and science to actually help us rewire the trauma of that survival issue in the moment. We can do that through nutrition, but we can also do that through light sound therapy. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. But first I want to talk about these brain waves, because these brain waves are always working in your favor to help you live your life. Has everybody here listened to a radio before? Okay, good. You know that if you turn to a country station, you're going to get country music. And you know if you turn to a rock station, you're going to get rock music. Well, your brain is set up just like the smartest computer in the universe. And it has different stations that it plays to help you function through the reality that you've created. All of your different neural pathways make up your reality. So the different neural pathways make up your stories. They make up who you see you are. That's why a brother and a sister can be sitting in the same room and talk about the events of last week and have completely different stories. Because they have different neural pathways, how they've observed, and the amount of trauma or less trauma that they've experienced in that moment. Perfect example of it is my younger brother and I both went through the same amount of abuse growing up. He was 4 years younger than me. So I was that nurturing element, and I went to and turned to like a victim energy, and he turned into kind of a perpetrator energy. He tried to protect himself. And when we were both, 18 years old, I turned to be a caretaker and a rescuer. I jumped into science. I jumped into study of all of this, and he turned to drugs. And so again, it's two different perspectives of reality at any given moment, of how you see the world, how you need to protect yourself in the world. So everyone's neural pathways are completely different, and it all results in the trauma. It all results in the trauma. So how you actually live your life and play who you are as your character is determined on how you see the world, and how you see the world is based in your neural pathways. How you identify with yourself is based in your neural pathways. And so the brainwaves we're going to be talking about tonight, we're going to keep it really simple because I like to teach it about a 4th grade level, because that's how I learn. And really keep it easy to understand. So you have basically this body that is constantly working to grow, thrive, and survive. That's its job. If I cut my arm and I leave it alone, it will heal. Would you agree? Awesome. With PTSD, the problem is we cut our arm and then we keep opening the wound over and over and over and over again. through outside stimulation that reminds us that we're not safe. It reminds us that we are not in control of our reality. And so we have to be on heightened alert. And when we're in heightened alert, we activate a part of our nervous system that moves us into fight or flight. Has everyone heard of that term before? Fight or flight. You choose, don't you? And in the moment of any trigger, you're choosing those two points. You're either, stopping what you're doing, or you're protecting yourself. Anyone ever had a tone with you and you got triggered, right? Or heard a loud noise and you were triggered? Or you ate something and you were triggered? Because an allergy is actually a byproduct of PTSD itself too. Because neurotoxins, remember, we're talking about emotional, physical, and chemical trauma. It's not just what you guys dealt with when you were on the battlefield, but what you did or didn't eat, what drugs you did or didn't take, okay? What you were exposed to chemically. Some of our vets from, we're dealing with Agent Orange issues that are dealing with all of these problems from Vietnam. That's a chemical trauma that gets activated anytime they're around those chemical properties that the brain feels. So when we're talking about brain waves, which brain waves actually put us into the trigger? And I'm going to explain them really generally for you guys tonight so that you can understand. And the first brain wave, you guys all have this handout. And it's real basic. I'm not going to go into the spiritual side of the brainwave, but I'm going to go into the scientific side of the brainwave tonight and let you know that when you're in a PTSD moment, post-traumatic stress, that your brain is moving to defense. It's moving into survival. It's moving into fight or flight. And the brainwave that it's moving into, shifting just like a car downshifting, is called beta. And beta is when you are basically going to go into your neural pathway and you're going to behave to survive. You're not going to behave to be nice. You're not going to behave to be politically correct. You're going to behave to defend yourself. Okay? No matter how nice of a person you are, if you're attacked, what are you going to do? You're going to defend yourself, and you're going to project outwardly how to do that, however you can, with your thoughts, with your actions, with your deeds, it doesn't matter. You're going to protect yourself. And so what happens is a heightened nervous system that puts the body into fight or flight since the day you move into boot camp doesn't actually move out of fight or flight, does it? Think about it. You move into boot camp. You're malnourished, you're exhausted, you're tired, you've left your family behind, and you're moving into the unknown where you're basically being broken down on purpose so they can build you back up. So they can build you back up to basically be that survival expert, to be that triggered expert, to be in that heightened state of awareness that fight or flight guarantees, doesn't it? Because think about what actually happens to the body when you're in fight or flight. Your digestion stops, your nervous system turns on, your heart rate accelerates, you sweat to become slippery, and your appendages actually get very, very strong while everything that's detoxing you, nourishing you, and healing you slows way, way down. Because in fight or flight, you need to be able to get out of there. You need to be able to have the assertion to protect yourself. You don't need to be digesting your food or healing that cancer cell that's sitting in your body in that moment, do you? You need to be able to get away and fight. And so think about someone who has moved into the military and they're in fight or flight 24/7. Because it isn't just physical action that puts your body into fight or flight. It's thinking, isn't it? Think about the last time you got pulled over by a police officer. Right? You moved into that adrenaline state as soon as you saw those lights. Your adrenaline began to pump and you began to think about what was going to happen. And then the police officer came and however that went down, you still thought about it. And depending on the outcome of that ticket, you could have thought about that for 3 weeks, and thoughts alone can produce 30,000 chemical reactions, can't they? You go home, you tell your spouse, you're reliving it. And the brain does not know the difference between real and imagination. So it's going on that journey with you, dumping those chemicals to give you those feelings that you need over and over again until you're done experiencing that trauma, or that fear, or that intense experience. So what happens is these guys, they go out there and they stay in fight or flight for months, for years. And so basically what happens is their immune system drops, the digestive system drops, and the metabolism slips. And they're living in constant state of heightened awareness. They're also being asked to basically move out of morality at times and fulfill the mission. They're asked to move their personal integrity out of the way and do things that they don't necessarily or would not do in a natural human experience. And so what they're doing at the same time of moving into fight or flight is they're shutting down their GPS, which I call your emotional guidance system. And you're basically, you are operating off of command. You are not operating off of your heart and your will in that moment. And so you become automatic. You become that autopilot syndrome. And then forever long you serve, or how many terms you go, or how long you contract, your body stays in this heightened state of survival. And then what happens is our boys come home, and the one thing, and women come home, and the one thing that happens when they come home is they realize that the one thing that was keeping them alive the whole time was their support system. What was their family? What was their team? Because at the end of the day, they could sit around and they could talk to each other, they could be there for each other. And when they come home, regardless if they have a wife and a brand new baby, or a husband, or a family, that's no longer their support system. Those people they come home to don't know what they've been through, what they've experienced, what they've lived through. So now there is a difference of reality. There's a difference in universe. They've changed. They're hardwired for battle. They're hardwired for survival. And now you put them in a cubicle, or you put them in a house, and you put them at a family dinner, and the tone of the grandparent is the same as the tone of someone they experienced on the battlefield, and they shift into that place in the brain, and they become feeling attacked again. And this is the number one reason why our veterans turn to addiction, is because what they're attempting to do is not feel. They're not trying to become drug addicts. They're not trying to become anything other than to quiet the noise, quiet the trigger, quiet the defensive reaction within them, and self-soothe through basically a numbing process. And unfortunately, in this moment, the VA's number one way of treating veterans is to medicate. They're medicating you guys so that you don't feel, okay? But unfortunately, what they're doing is they're activating parts of your brain that take you into heightened states of awareness, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, that is actually putting you into a heightened state of allowing you to feel alive. Because in different brain waves, see beta, the brain wave that you stayed in, or that I stayed in most of my life, fight or flight, created all kinds of health issues. By the time I was 30, I had autoimmune disease. See what happens when your nervous system has been shut down for 30 years, then your immune system isn't working either. Adrenal fatigue, thyroid issues, eyesight issues, hearing issues, headaches, stomach aches. These are all byproducts of the body not working. The body being in a heightened state of awareness for too long and not being able to shift over into the other side of the nervous system, which is repair, detox, soothe, digest, right, and thrive. See, one is survive and one is thrive. And when we're not able to get back and forth to the parts of the nervous system, the body basically just starts to die. And this is where all of this autoimmune issues have come from, is too many people for too long have been in fight or flight. That is where it caused. The number one cause of disease is not disease itself, it's stress. Stress causes disease because stress turns the nervous system into fight or flight, and it turns the immune system off. What happens is anything sitting in your stomach is going to rot. Look at all this Crohn's disease that we have. Look at all these stomach issues that we have. This is a byproduct of stress. So the next brainwave that I want to talk about is a brainwave called gamma. And I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit. Because gamma is what's called the heightened state of awareness. That when you are in the complete stillness of meditation, that you feel unconditional love. But this is also brought upon by drug use. It is also the same euphoric feeling that our veterans actually get when they're part of a team. They feel connected, they feel unity. That's why they crave these drugs. That's why they crave that brainwave. Because gamma is actually considered the God brainwave, because it makes you feel godly. Which is why our veterans turn to these heroines and meth and things like that, because what it does is it completely puts your brain into a state of euphoric, God-like self. okay? And so that's what they're reaching. They're reaching from one extreme to the other because they're feeling like all they can do is survive, and they want to feel that strength, that power, that pleasure. So the brainwave that we actually need to get into in order to heal the human body is a brainwave called theta. And theta is also a heightened state of awareness. And when the body is calm and out of danger and at peace with itself, it will move into theta, and in theta it moves to the other side of the nervous system where the body digests its food. It moves into healing, it moves into detoxing, it rebuilds cells, it regenerates itself constantly. It's also a place of intuition. It's a place of expanded consciousness. It's a state of being where you're empathetic, where you feel what other people feel in this state. And you also feel what you're really feeling versus what your neural pathways are telling you. And this is exactly the brainwave that happens when you get into a state of meditation. Now, what is meditation? If the VA would just start with meditation, we would have huge results very quickly. But how do you put a brain in meditation that's been in heightened state of awareness for 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, 5 years? It's pretty much impossible because you have what's called monkey mind, which means you can't turn it off. You can't undo the fatigue that the brain causes because it's always thinking. Have you ever felt utterly exhausted but you can't sleep? This is what our vets deal with every day, because the thing is, guess what happens when a vet sleeps? They're in danger. So they may rest their body for a few hours, but they don't turn off their minds. And when you don't turn off your mind, you're dumping huge amounts of cortisol into your bloodstream, which is a stress hormone that causes the whole system to go out of whack. So what we need to do is we need to manually override that monkey mind. We need to manually override these neural pathways, and we need to, just like a computer, program the brain to move into a natural state of theta at least 20 minutes to 40 minutes per day. Because this brain has not been in that brainwave since before they left, before that trauma happened. And if this brain cannot stay in theta, it will never heal, no matter the medication, no matter the surgery, no matter what you do on the outside, because the body must heal from the inside, right? You cannot heal a body from the outside. It has to heal from the inside. Whatever the doctors are doing to you, they're doing from the inside out, not the outside in. And so what we want to do is we want to eliminate anything outside of us. And we want to manually override these brain waves, and we want to put our veterans' brain waves into a state of theta manually, 20 minutes a day. And what it is like is if your computer has ever been haywire and your only solution is to unplug it and plug it back in and reboot it, that is what meditation does for the body. It stops the mind. It puts yourself, this being, into stillness. And at stillness, it can auto-reboot back to its natural blueprint. Because we all have this natural blueprint. Just because we've created neural pathways within our brain does not mean it's permanent. It was added, we can change it. And deep meditation can heal every single aspect of the body. Because basically the body is so intelligent, it knows how to heal itself. Just like I said, if I cut my arm and left it alone, it would heal. But the problem with PTSD is we don't let that heal. We don't give it any time. We're constant state of awareness. And just